We're going live here in a couple minutes with Jacob Evans Kendall to talk about navigating life's transitions with clarity and composure. So this is going to be a good conversation on how to navigate hard things in your life to get through to the next part, and maybe do it with a smile, even if it's hard. So be right back. About 2 minutes. We'll see you. Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the tie to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Hey, welcome to Never Been Promoted. I'm your host, Thomas Helfrich. We are live today with Jacob Evans Kendall. He is a two-time open heart surgery survivor, lifetime caregiver, and he's got an incredible amount of insight and work he's done with helping people kind of navigate through these hard parts of their life. And we're going to jump into that a bit because, as you know, entrepreneurship can be a bit hard. Maybe not as hard as a heart surgery or two of them, for that matter. So, listen from kind of the analogies and the metaphors and the things that actually Jacob has gone through and the people he's worked with here to kind of learn how you can apply that through transitions from maybe full-time employment to entrepreneurship or from divorce or from lots of things that are going to happen. Our mission here at Never Been Promoted, if you've never been here before, is to help entrepreneurs get better at entrepreneurship. That's simple. We help you cut the tie to all that kind of shit holding you back. And I want you to unleash the entrepreneur within you. And if you, even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, just get better at life when you get better at cutting the ties to things that are holding you there. My only shameless plug is, if you can, please go to neverbeenpromoted.com and check out what we have there, from just some magazine articles of our guest interviews and also the podcast. And if you do like the show and you're watching it, youtube.com at neverbeenpromoted. Enough shameless plugs. Let's go ahead and bring in Mr. Kendall. Hello, Jacob. How you been? Jacob Evans Kendall. 3 names, no assassination attempts, not a serial killer. It's established that now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, don't rule anything out.
Right. As of today, like here in 2024. Right.
Yeah, Thomas, it's good to be on here for a conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that would be a weird transition, right? From open heart surgery survivor to helping people to becoming a serial killer. Like, that would be. You could help someone navigate through that.
I suppose I do bring some unique insights from those experiences.
You're supposed to shut that conversation down, right? Like, no, I will not help a serial killer become a serial killer. Now,
my bad. Let's start over.
Hi, I'm Thomas. Thanks for joining here today. Jacob's going to be joining today. Jacob, good to see you. You've got a crazy. We're going to get to your kind of journey story here, and you've helped people like transition through careers and bigger things. I'll leave it to you to do the introduction, but maybe just start with kind of where your passion is today, and then back up to kind of how you got to here.
Yeah, sure. So I typically say that I have 2 aspects of my identity that define what I do today. You've already named one of them. I've had 2 open heart surgeries. I have lifelong experience navigating my own complex medical needs. I have various things going on, various specialists that I see on a regular basis. And that, when you navigate your own complex medical needs, that also means navigating our ridiculous healthcare system. And over the years, push became shove, and I want to shove back. And so that's one part of it. The other is that I grew up, my childhood dream, so to speak, was to be a true Renaissance person. I much prefer to be a jack of all trades rather than an expert of one. We need experts. It's great to have them, especially like when I had my surgeries. I wanted someone who was really good with that particular kind of surgery. I needed that. I've had my aortic valve replaced twice, in case there's anyone here can relate to that kind of thing. But I prefer, we also need interdisciplinary folks, multidimensional thinkers. And so I have diverse training in social work, public health, gerontology. I'm studying theology right now. Biology, I have formal training in all of these things. And I apply that to what I'm doing now, which is chronic disease and healthcare, aging, advocacy. Like I said, we need some changes in our healthcare system, and I'm not the only person who has to have these that recognizes that we need these changes. It's tough for patients, and I've also been a caregiver. It's tough for informal caregivers as well. Like, imagine your older parent is sick with something and you're the primary care for them at home, that kind of situation. Yeah. So that's thinking about how I got to this point, and where I am right now. I've stumbled through various career moves, and picked up important lessons with each of those steps. And here I am now. I do speaking and consulting around chronic disease advocacy.
Yeah, well, we won't go down the healthcare role habit, because what happens at least in this country, when you say the word healthcare, people immediately put a division line of polarization in the middle, and you can't even suggest any idea that's one way, or you're a socialist. You can't go the other way, or you're a capitalist.
Yeah.
And so you can't create reason on either. And I think it's a very intentional, this has been set up because it's such a huge lobby.
Yeah.
The money that's behind this, it's too big to fail, and it's too big to be redone unless someone just ignores it. It just ignores it. Just flat out goes ignored.
Yeah.
New model. Here's new. So anyway, so it's hard to have that conversation. I don't think there's a person on the planet, though, that doesn't think that it needs to be redone, except for the executives who are making the money off of the current system.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I will leave it at that. And that does not share a political view, to be very clear. But when the people who are making money from how it's done right now have no interest in changing it. The people who
I want to piggyback off,
regardless of how much money you make.
And like, I have to choose strategically at what level I'm going to focus on. Of course, I would love to go to the very top and try to make these changes, but you have to convince people to love money less for that. And this is why I often help individuals and families and organizations, more at the local level with these issues, because there are so many moments throughout a given day or given week where I'm like, if we take this all the way to the top, this is a truly intractable problem. And that's pretty much what you're saying. So I have to very pragmatically choose where I'm going to come in and try to make that difference.
Right. Well, and okay, guys. So the reason we're I think this is appropriate to kind of go through, because you're trying to navigate wellness through a horrible time in your life, potentially, right? You're trying to navigate some kind of sense of all the things we're going to go through here. But the assets and resources you need from that are expensive sometimes, and the reasons behind it are what they are. But it's not even just a mountaintop. You have a whole mountain range of tops you would need to convince to get that to work.
Yeah.
And so it's truly unsurmountable by any one human to do. Unless we get into theology, and then one. Then maybe, but we're not going to go down that path. Let's say that let's strip aside the things we can't do, the restrictions because of healthcare, whatever else. Talk to me how will you define, first of all, like this life transition? Define that first, because sometimes it's not open heart surgery. Sometimes it could be smaller as well. But will you define that first, please?
Yeah. So I had my second surgery while I was a professor. And when you get your PhD, you go into that usually thinking that, okay, I'm going to be a professor, I'm going to be faculty at university, and I'm going to do research, I'm going to teach, and I'm going to get tenure and eventually retire as a professor. And that was my goal for those first few years. I taught social work for a couple of years, and then I taught global health. And I was in a great department at a good university. I met my now wife at that university. And I thought I would retire in a setting like that. But within the span of like 2 or 3 year period, the entrepreneurial bug bit me. I witnessed my own colleagues getting tenure, and I used to think that it was more liberating, but I actually think that it's less liberating. So I
Crap.
observed that happening with people. I got married. I had my second heart surgery. And my wife and I were going to move to North Carolina from Georgia, but then my dad had a debilitating stroke and heart attack. And I'm like, I can't leave my mom in Alabama, where I'm from, to do that on her own. So we moved to help them. And then we all moved again down south. And then my dad died. And then my wife and I had our first child, and we have a second one on the way. And so within this 3 year period, I also started a couple businesses. Within a 3 year period, I did all of these things. And it's honestly, or all, I should say, those things happened to me. And it's honestly difficult for me to pinpoint what was the original initial catalyst on that. And I often say, definitively, my heart surgery was definitely one of those. When you're forced to have to face your own mortality, even briefly and intermittently, then it changes things about you, right? You have different priorities. And I got to the point where, like, you know what? My life expectancy is lower now because of this, and I don't want to stare down the barrel of the tenure gun, so to speak, and I just don't want that to be my future. I want to have more control over what I do. And so all of those are major life transitions, right? You have a major health thing when you switch from one career to another, when you have to become a caregiver for a parent, when you lose that parent, when you get married. All of those things are major life transitions, and I just happen to experience them within a relatively small period of time.
Yeah, but well, and when you're so from an entrepreneurial standpoint, right? You have differentiation because you're young, and how old are you again? Sorry, I normally don't ask that, but it's relevant to this conversation. So,
I'm a gerontologist. I never mind anyone talking about age. I'm 38.
38. So you're young. So you're still young, and you shouldn't have open heart surgeries by everyone's kind of calculation ever. Really, and if you do, it's usually genetic, or the point is that you've had to face something where most did not until their 60s or 70s or something else.
Yeah.
And because of that puts you in a spot of perspective that most people don't have. Yes. And I think when someone's looking, I guess the thing is, how does someone know they should come work with you? And it's not like a shameless plug, but I guess two things. One, I think you described the transition of when, but I've never thought of paying some of that. So, like, what's usually the pain point that they've come through that they really they need to go get some help professionally for? Because you're not going to be on an ICD-10 code, to get billed. They're going to pay you just outright to go get something to help them. But when is it, and how do they really know, as opposed to kind of guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll first answer that by saying when they don't know. I wish that we did a better job as a society preparing for these things in advance, because we're moving quickly toward a time in which no one in the entire world, let's just talk about the US, no American is going to be unaffected by chronic disease, is going to be unaffected by caregiving. And while I can sit here and say that I think, I would love to go into universities, I would love to go into groups of young professionals and say, hey, listen, you're now professional, you're now married, whatever, you're starting to have children, you need to go ahead and get life insurance. You need to go ahead and be having conversations about what it's going to look like at the end of your life. The people who are surviving you need to go ahead and prepare to, have the conversation about what's going to happen when your parents have debility and you need to take care of their needs in your home. But that wouldn't work because people don't see it as a need. I can see something as a need, but if my audience doesn't, it doesn't matter. So most of the people that I end up getting, talking to and having conversations with, they're already in the midst of those crises. And then you don't have to convince them at all, because caregiving at home, caregivers have a higher morbidity and lower life expectancy compared to people of the same age who are not caregivers. And people who are doing the caregiving are not surprised to hear this because they feel absolutely buried in it. So most of the people who can easily relate to what I'm saying are people who are in the middle of those situations. I also, speak with providers, and many doctors and nurses and others also are not prepared to face an aging population that we're a part of and barreling toward. And some of them are willing to admit it, and others not. So people who are in the midst of it are those who, they don't need to be convinced.
Right. What do you do? Like, so how do you navigate it as opposed to like, because if I looked at it right from, and I'm like, it's just part of life. Like things happen, right? Like, and I may have a different mentality than most, and it doesn't make it any easier, but I wouldn't think I would need a coach through it. And so what I'm driving to with that is, when you're someone comes to you, what do you do with them to accelerate them acceptance? What is it I kind of get, because I see the need. I wouldn't know what the value would be back to me outside of, hey, I'm just experiencing life, right? I mean, like everyone has to die. Everyone has to have hard parts. There is no heaven without hell kind of idea, right? You don't get the shitty things that happen make you enjoy the beach. You enjoy the beach that much more kind of idea, right? So unless you live on the beach, you hate hurricanes, and then you enjoy the mountains, whatever your antithesis is. What's the value? Like, do you accelerate something? Do you replace something? Do you have them mindset? That's a long way to ask that.
No, that's a great question. So, because I'm a gerontologist, because I'm speaking about
what's a gerontologist? Could you define that for people like
you're
myself?
right. I need to be better about that. It's someone who studies aging in some kind of way. A geriatrician is a doctor who serves older adults. So a gerontologist is someone who focuses on aging in their career in some kind of way. So I'm a gerontologist. That's what my PhD is in gerontology. And so therefore, and I also speak at churches, many church members are older adults. And so therefore, it's very common for me to do a talk or a presentation in which there are a good number of older adults or their children who care for older adults in the home. And it's common for people to come up after me and say, hey, I have this blank issue. What do you charge for one-on-one consultations? And I'll answer that question. And the kind of things that I'll talk about is, hey, listen, this is what I've learned from being a caregiver, from being someone who's had surgeries, all this experience with encountering our medical care system. And these are some strategies I've learned along the way. And honestly, most of them are really, really simple. It's just that when someone is embroiled in a crisis like this, they don't think of them. So one of the main things I do with one-on-one is, hey, listen, these are some things that you can do that are really simple, but they can drastically make this better for you.
Is it generally reducing stress is like the first marker of acceptance of some sort? Like what's the marker of, like, when you're selling anything or providing any service, the faster you get the gratification to get them over the hurdles of, I'm not sure about this, like I need it, but I'm not sure. What's the most noticeable first thing that they get? Like, do they reduce their stress on the transition itself? Is that like the first thing that happens? Like, hey, we bring the stress levels down. Like, what's the person when they work with you one-on-one? What do they experience quickly so they know they're in good hands? Because the reason, someone may not work with you, right? If someone's working with somebody and they're not feeling these things, it should give them perspective that maybe they have the wrong coach or they have the wrong idea. What are you seeing in your people that you work with, the first benefits, like initial benefits?
Well, misery loves company, so definitely that they're not alone, for sure. And then, when I tell them some of these pragmatic steps, they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. That's definitely going to make it a little bit easier for me. And then another thing that I focus on, I guess you could say more of a soft skill, is self-advocacy and assertiveness. A very common thing that I get when I do a talk, because I'm very open about my own experiences and my own health and whatnot. And so I'll talk about, hey, here's the story of an encounter I had with one of my physicians. And then a very common response I get is like, what? You said that to your doctor? Like, you asked them that? I'm like, yeah, you're damn right I did. And you should do the same thing, because there's this belief that what physicians tell you is biblical truth and you don't question it, and that's that. And I push back against that. And so another thing that they walk away with is having more self-advocacy and more assertiveness, or at least to know that it's okay to do that. Those are skills. You're not going to just flip a switch and have them right off the bat, but get a little bit better each time you go back to the doctor. And, to realize that it's okay to do those things.
My wife does this, like, she should be an auditor, but like, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, went to the dentist. They didn't do x-rays, though they tried to upsell me by not saying that. They always said my insurance didn't cover it. They do cover it, just not every 6 months. This kind of little shit drives me nuts. And then I'm stressed out because I'm calling her. Not that I'm worried about spending $20, but I don't want to get yelled at for spending $20 I wasn't supposed. Anyway, the whole thing. I go through that. And then they come back at the end and say, oh, your little one has 2 cavities. The other are fine. And the little one had an extraction. I'm like, she's never had an extraction. Oh, then maybe she lost her tooth. And I was like, all right, whatever. It's a weird thing to note in your chart. But she has 2 cavities. I'm thinking, how do you know that without an x-ray? And so I thought that, then I dismissed it. And then my wife looked at it and goes, I don't think she has cavities. I think they just looked at the chart and they're trying to get you to come in so they can drill her teeth. And so it's that kind of stuff, or it's looking at like how they've coded things. Like, well, that's not right. And it's unbelievable, the inefficiencies, because of what you said. The doctor says something that even that half the time doesn't get on the chart. So I think there's a coordination I was getting to that with listen to what someone's telling you. And I think a good indication of a doctor to help you on some of these things is, do they accept your Google doctor version to challenge them? And some of them hate it. Some of the older school ones really hate it. The younger ones get it because they're like, this is what I'm facing. And if they can't do that, you got to question if you got the right person. Are you saying that as green? Because like a lot of, they do not want to be challenged because they have so much schooling. But then I'm like, yeah, but Google has more information in you of people that are, yes, you're medically correct. Like, but what about all these other things I'm reading about, like from journals? So anyway, I'll get off that piece, but I think you're spot on that you got to challenge with some substance and go do your own fact check. Because what I find is no one's going to solve any complex problems for you. The medical system is going to want to take the easiest path to do the building. If you're generally healthy, but you still feel like something's wrong, you're going to be on the hook to figure things out in your life, period. And I think stuff that's not seen sometimes, it's even worse. Mental health is even worse. So anyway, I'm done. I'll be
yeah. I completely agree with that. The quote in one of my favorite episodes of Ted Lasso, where he's quoting Walt Whitman, but it misattributes to Walt Whitman. But anyway, the quote is, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I now apply that to every aspect of my life. I try to be that way myself, but I prefer providers who are curious rather than judgmental. Listen, when you have complex medical needs and you have several providers, you're not going to get that out of everyone. But if you can have 2 or 3 who are curious, who are willing to listen to you patiently, and who are willing to go to bat for you, that can spread itself out over all of your other ones. But, I'm a little bit smarter than like I should be smarter than the average bear because of the training that I come in with, or I should say intellectual. That's what I mean. I'm a little bit more intellectual.
Well, you have more experience. I'd say I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to give you credit there. You are smarter than most people, guys. So I just want to tell you, I've met with Jacob several times. He is very smart, but more importantly, he recognizes that the stuff's hard and knows that everyone's not going to be in the position where you've been, with experience of all the things you've gone through already in life transition, but applying the fact that, all right, I know I understand this a little bit, but not everyone's going to get this because it's already hard enough. And you're an academic and you're okay reading, is my point. And you can, not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
So, but like, I'm sorry, keep going. I just want to give you credit.
I acknowledge that I use intellectual language, and that's not always the most relatable. But when I walk into a doctor's office, I am my intellectual self. And as soon as I start pushing a little bit and show that, like, hey, I understand more about this than you think that I do,
right,
that opens up the conversation. And so I try to help people realize, like, hey, you have these questions. You're not dumb when it comes to your own medical condition. You have perspectives about your own condition that your doctor and no one else can possibly understand. And so just push back a little bit, ask the question, show them that you're willing to push it a little bit so that you get what you need. And that's what I mean by assertiveness.
I'd love you to hear my hack. And because they do a lot of messaging now with stuff. And so I'm like, all right, well, if we're gonna do that. So I'll take test results and I'll put a bunch of data in a GPT. Anonymized, by the way, don't put your real name. But the point is, I put it in there. I'm like, from a medical perspective, GPT, how would you read and what kind of ancillary things should I be asking my caregiver about? And I'll give them that report and say, hey, this is an analysis from a medical AI, whatever. And how many times that will change the narrative of the conversation a bit. Specifically, like if you're on a medication, you're like, hey, I feel like my dosage is low, and they're like trying to be risk adverse. And you're like, but listen, I don't feel the effects you're talking about. And I keep, it's amazing how that helps influence sometimes something, because you're like, given these other things, could we try this? And I tell you, I shouldn't have to do that. But I think the perspective of a healthcare giver is 2 things. One, and I hate to say this, what can we sell, bill, or upsell test-wise so we can justify things down the road? Which there's that. But there's also, what's the risk? Doing that is also risk adverse. if I don't test for it, I can't bill for it. And then so there is a huge money element that is truly real in the medical world that affects your ability to navigate and transition that you have to be aware of. And I know we're on this topic a bit, but the truth is, I think this is so clear on transition. Sometimes you're describing what's hard about transitions in life, specifically medically, is because of the healthcare system so hard to use. Is that what your kind of premise is starting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone all rainbows and unicorns. No one person, when I'm talking to a patient, like they're not going to be able to overcome all these barriers. I'm just trying to help them squeeze more juice than they are. And that can often make a big enough difference to change one's quality of life, to change one's level of stress. And if it can, why not do it? Because most of the things that you can do to squeeze a little bit more juice are simple. They're not these hard tasks that you have to do. And so that's one of the main things I say is, you're not going to change everything. It's not going to be a completely positive experience, but if you can squeeze a little bit more juice, that can make a difference.
Do you help people understand the paperwork behind it too? Is that part of it?
It depends. You have to be really careful with that kind of thing because it's always, this is not real medical advice kind of thing. I'm more willing to talk about that with heart disease stuff specifically. So, you have to be really careful. I can't bill insurance, liability and things like that. The way that I'll approach that is give my own experience. I'm very happy to do that. Right.
Yeah.
And that can often help with things. So that's one thing I can say. And I want to go back to one of the points that you said earlier. There have been multiple times recently with a neurologist of mine where I don't remember if I learned it in the Facebook group that I'm in of other people who've had my surgery, or I just did it for my own research. But he told me a certain treatment plan, and I said, "Oh, hey, I read about this somewhere." And because I brought that up, he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Let's change your treatment plan." And it's okay if physicians don't know everything. They shouldn't be expected to know everything, but don't tell me that you know everything. Don't act like it. Be curious, not judgmental.
Well, okay. So how does someone work with you? So what gaps do you fill for them as they navigate a life transition? And we can focus around medical because I think that's where the bulk of the conversation's been. Marriage is one thing. There's probably the theology side is probably a better way to go to the marriage part, but the medical pieces where you have direct life experiences and where does someone like yourself fill the gaps? That's tangible. Like a 1, 2, 3 list, like, hey, when you work with me or you work with somebody who can do this, this is what you're going to, I'll go back to what you get, but like that way, if someone knows why they should come seek additional help. Cause I don't think a lot of people know they should. That I guess is what I'm learning too on
that. I would probably at least somewhat disagree with the comment that most people don't know that they should. The people who are in the middle of these situations definitely know that they need more help. And especially if I just spoke on a stage or did a presentation, it usually comes through at that point. But I'm going to keep going back to the main things, and are I know that they're often listed like on a resume as a soft skill or whatnot. I think that they're hard skills of self-advocacy and assertiveness. So let's talk about caregiving for a moment. There's this belief, and my mom was like this with my dad. It's like, well, this is just my duty. I have to do it, and they don't even consider that there might be other resources out there. It's just their duty, and it's almost as if it would hurt their pride not to completely sacrifice themselves on the altar of martyrdom in order to be a caregiver. And I try to push back against that at every step along the way and say, hey, listen, you come first. There's a reason they tell you on airplanes to put on your own oxygen mask before you help anyone else. It's the same thing here. You are no good to the person you're caring for if you become sick and disabled as a result of your caregiving. And I can show you the data that is likely to happen unless you care for yourself. And my preferred approach, I can't always do this, I get it, but my preferred approach is just to be very blunt and snarky and say, get the hell over yourself, and you have to go for your needs and take care of yourself first. It's not going to be perfect. This is still going to impact you pretty hard, but you can do more to care for yourself. So that's my preferred approach, is just to be very, very blunt.
But I think that there's a on that though. I think there's a personality that you see this play out with relationships of, oh my God, I always have to take care of my kids, my wife, or my husband never does. Yeah. I'll have to clean the whole house because the cleaners can't do it well enough and the kids won't help and you don't help. Or, hey, I have to do every home project, but I won't hire anyone. Like, and I'm making stuff up. So honey, if you're listening to this, I wasn't directed at anything we have, but those are just typical things. But the truth is, like, those are things that people could martyr themselves around, as opposed to realize with the situation. So if you're like this, you're going to be like this later, is my point. I don't think this is something that just shows up. I think this is something that's ingrained as a behavior. And this is the big one, if you will. This is now, I have to, because, and you should, anyway, so I'll be quiet, but I think you can nip this early.
Yeah. And it's not just an individual thing. It's a systemic thing. Most caregivers are women, not surprisingly. If there are multiple siblings, and then it's most likely to be the daughters, it's more likely to be an unmarried daughter. And so, I mean, you have systemic issues like patriarchy and other things that are related to gender roles built into this. And for centuries and centuries, this is just caregiving and that kind of thing is seen as something that women are supposed to do. And this is true across the vast majority of societies, past and present. And so, we're not going to be able to have a good conversation about this kind of thing if we don't recognize that, yes, this is something that is baked into our very psyche. It goes down to our marrow. I would not be reasonable for me to just talk to someone for an hour and say, hey, listen, get over it, be a better self-advocate, be more assertive of yourself, and expect them to just change that the next time I talk with them. That's not going to happen.
What's the balance, though? I mean, so, okay, yeah, but who else? What's the next question is, then who? I can't afford it. How? That'd be my immediate follow-up questions, and probably the largest justified excuses, if you will, of why not. What's the answer to that, so to speak, or how do you approach that problem question?
What's the answer to what? I just want to make sure I understand your question.
Okay, great. I'll take care of myself, but what does that mean? Who's going to take care of that other person now? So who's going to take care of I'm the caregiver. Well, who else is going to do that? When else?
Okay. Yeah. So I will go a little bit theology here for a second, because churches just happen to be a great example to use because they're natural social communities. And a lot of older people I've talked to are members of churches. So I'll just use that as an example. All right. Because of this whole thing, this idea that we should just sacrifice ourselves, it's my responsibility, I don't want to bother other people with it. That's American individualism at its finest, I would actually say at its worst. We can prove this by the fact that most caregivers, most people who are a caregiver at home, don't tell their colleagues at work about it. So we don't know the true extent of this burden, but it's a massive burden. And so, using a church as an example, one thing that I'll say is, listen, are you a member of a church? Okay. If so, why don't you consider going to your pastor or going to the hostess of the host of the chair of the hostess committee, or someone who takes care of this kind of thing, and say, hey, listen, I've got this issue going on at home, and I'm not going to be able to just alleviate all the challenges because I do have to care for this person, but it would help tremendously if we can plan some kind of thing where different church members across the span of a month or 2 months, depending on the size of the church, y'all plan to bring us 2 meals a week. And that takes some time off my plate, and that helps. Little practical, small, simple things like that. We have to be willing to ask for it, though, right? But if we are, and you ask for things like that, then those kinds of things can help a lot. So that's an example of one pragmatic step.
I would listen. I mean, we're in a part of a large community church called North Point, and that's their thing, is they're outwardly there to help you. Of course they ask for tithing and money and all the things that go with it, but they're also like, hey, but if you can't afford that, we want to help you. If you can't afford to pay for books and schools and whatever, like not private schools, books and like food, we can help you. We're not looking for anything. We're looking for those out there that are, struggling to make ends meet or have gone through a life event. So I think that's a fantastic, because there's a lot of people that are also, they're you. And you're like, hey, listen, I'm going to go give an hour or go mow that yard because I know they can't do it and they have no time and they can't, or whatever it is, right? Just something to help them with an hour here, 2 hours there. My daughter's a nurse. She's willing to maybe study all night and be the caregiver at nighttime to keep an eye on something. Like, I think there's probably things around there. Anyway, I love that idea. So great example. I'm sure there's others. Keep going though. I love it. I just felt like I had to say something. That is such a brilliantly nice look to your community. But if you're not part of a community, what do you do?
Well, yeah.
So,
You have things like the most common name for it is the Area Agency on Aging. Sometimes it's called the Council on Aging. These places exist in most medium-sized or large cities. Sometimes even they serve rural areas. Give them a call. Just call them and say, hey, listen, this is my situation. What kinds of resources exist in this community? And in most cases, there's something there that you can follow the breadcrumbs, so to speak, and just make the call. And then they'll probably give you the phone number of someone else to call. Make that call. They may give you another referral. Just keep following those breadcrumbs. These resources exist. They're not perfect. They're not going to solve all of your problems. Again, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to get you to squeeze a little bit more juice. So Area Agency on Aging, AAA, give them a call, or the Council on Aging. They are there. If it's not a thing related to aging, then just Google, this is my city, what services are there for disabilities, or ask ChatGPT. I mean, look online for the whatever, fill in the blank, disability. I have a question about wills or whatever, and get these questions. I'm also a member of a few Facebook groups. The main one that I spend time in is it's people who are also on warfarin, a blood thinner, who have had one of their valves replaced. So that describes me. We're all in there commiserating together, but people ask questions, right? And it's clear in the guidelines for joining this group. This is not medical advice. Don't treat it as such, but we're talking about our experiences. Hey, has anyone ever experienced this? Tell me more about what you went through. And I have learned just as much from that group. And I also contribute to the group. It's not just about take and give and take. And I've learned so much more, at least as much from that group and other people who have had my experiences as I have from physicians and nurses. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's, is there a Facebook group? Is there a Reddit thread that you can follow? There's probably something for whatever it is you were going through. I guarantee you there's some kind of social group out there, and it's free to join.
I tell you what, I mean, I know individuals pay you to do this. I mean, I've gotten to know you a little bit, obviously, than just this podcast. So people who are listening, keep that in mind. But your sense of purpose, and just in general, ingrained in you to drive this, you're like the perfect candidate to be like that non-for-profit that collects money with the intent of just helping people, right? Like it's something, I don't know if you've looked at or whatever else, but just I think that's like churches should be working directly with you and providing you like funds, so they don't have to go do it for their members, but they know that they can trust you because you're like, hey, this guy has a team and organization, resources, and it's free. And then that way, your life's taken care of money wise, but also because money drives. You have to have money. You have to. A non-for-profit has to make money enough to give the things they need to go do. So like, don't be under illusion of that. But I think this is like I think your bigger purpose personally is to build something like that, like a huge organization.
Oh, absolutely.
Like transitions. I think, and I don't think that's something that has to be like slow going. I think you just declare it, get focused, and just freaking go after it and hit every church out there and be like, we want to work with your church, please, but we do need donations from your church to be able to kind of help support it. Like, it's like and they can do that. They can go nonprofit to nonprofit. Like, anyway, so the point is, this is a big, I didn't realize how I'm getting myself in the future of this. And like, this is going to be something that's going to hit all of us. I mean, death and transitions in life. And this guy I recently met on this TV series I was on called The Blocks, right? And he does in-home care services. And he's like, you've never heard of it until you need it.
Yep.
And it's so true. It's like, you're right. I have never even considered that search. He's like, but as soon as you get a sick parent or you get sick, that's all you're going to be searching for. I'm like, oh.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yep.
I'm going to enjoy that.
I'm glad to hear you say that. That should be the route that I should go, because that's the route where I want to end up. And I've struggled through being a first-time business owner just a few years ago of knowing exactly what the next steps are. And right now, the main thing that I'm doing is speaking and building my reputation. I'm on podcasts like this. I have 4 podcasts just this week alone that I'm being a guest on. And, I'm trying to just build my reputation and thought leadership. But what you just said is what I want to do. I want to contract with these organizations, whether it's churches or someone else, and say, hey, listen, you're not equipped to provide this yourself. And it would be a lot less expensive if I contract with you and then you provide it to your members rather than me working with your members one-on-one. So it's very affirmational to hear you say that.
No, I mean, listen, I mean, and like I said, the reason I preface that, I've met before and I've seen some of your journey a little bit on this. This is where you should be doing, in my opinion. Like it's not your end game, because I think you'll do more than even this. But you start with your own community, ask them how to organize, have your actual local organizations, SBA, whatever else. You says, hey, I want to do not-for-profit. Here's my mission. And people, you'll just learn. Like you'll just learn. You'll read and you'll learn, and you'll pay an attorney to set up correctly, and it's not as much as you think it needs to be, and all the other things. And the church and the organizations around you are already a part of will put you in touch with the right people to do it at the right price, and so you can do these things. And then you're down. Then your role changes to a content creator and a donation finder. But that's the thing that, like, especially with your story, people will do the GoFundMe. People will help you get it off the ground. Like people, and then it's just hard work, right? It's probably as hard work as trying to find a client. But the thing is, this will have bigger purpose, because once you get one, especially if you get a church network or two, you'll get many, many more. And this is the rule of small checks. How many $5,000 checks do you need to really make it work? Probably not that many. 10, 20. How many churches are there in Alabama alone? God, in Georgia, that's like one street. So anyway, and it doesn't have to just be Christian, but I would probably say you'd favor one half of the aisle, so to speak, of the thing, and just go with it. But anyway, that being said, I think that's your bigger purpose. Actually, from a business model, I think it works better, because I think running down individuals already facing a bunch of money from a healthcare broken system to help them, and you're like, hey, I need a few thousand more from you to help you now. Pull back on that one.
But you said the nonprofit route would be better?
I think so, because the nonprofits can actually give you money to help them serve their community. They could be like, hey, I'm looking to do this and see.
No, you mean I'm asking, I should have a nonprofit, or I should?
Yeah, I mean, for you, it's no different, because like you'd have a board and you'd pay yourself a salary. From a business standpoint, the truth is, though, I think you could do more impact if you're working alongside church organizations as the guy that helps them through life transition. Of, hey, we work with fill in the blank name of your your organization, right? And they're like, hey, we're a partner. You guys are, like you're doing all the things legally and document wise for them to be able to do that. But that gives each community you work with a deeper set of resources to work with you. Maybe here's a bunch of free resources and counselors that you'll meet along the way that can also learn your brand. And so it's just, we'll take it offline, but that's where I think if you're trying to get as big an impact as I know you're trying to get, that's probably the route. Because then you get one to many.
Yeah.
And then many, and from a brand standpoint, then now you're speaking more, because you can go speak at a church. You can go, you can go in front of a Wednesday night at, your local Methodist church and be like, hey, life transitions are hard. Anybody, they can invite, it becomes a value add for that church itself. If you have a book, they can buy them, that kind of stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think this gets, money aside, this gets you more impact, which is, I know what you're chasing. I mean, money's got to be there too. Don't get me wrong, but like it's
that's great insight. Yeah, I mean, we're having a second child in December, so money is definitely a thing. But I firmly believe that both of those things can come together if you do it the right way and have the right thing to offer. So you offer excellent insights here. Thanks.
Well, I'm here for you, Jacob. I mean, it is Tuesday. I'm not gonna say the date because I'm not sure when this will air. Because but God damn, it takes them how long? See, I cussed. Do you see that? Do you see I did that? I dropped the Lord's name in vain right there. All right. Jacob, this is the part of the show where you get to brag about yourself directly and tell people who should get a hold of you and where. It's shameless plug time.
All right. Well, then I guess I'll be shameless. Yeah. So you can see the website there, jacobevanskendall.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can reach me there. It's Jacob Evans Kendall is my LinkedIn handle. And let's connect in one of those places. On my website, I talk about my talking topics. I list some of the podcasts that I've been on, and there's some testimonials there. Lately, I've been speaking more at churches than I have at other kinds of organizations. I think the fact that I'm in a theology program makes that connection a little bit easier. Plus, like you said, here in Alabama, there's a church on every street corner. So there's a lot there. Coming from academia, I am involved in university communities. That's also a natural fit. I can say, hey, I've been a professor. I've been a student for many years. I get it. These things. My first heart surgery was in the middle of a PhD program. And then the second one was, like I said earlier, while I was faculty. And so I understand those things. And if you have a need where your employees or your church members are dealing with health crises, their own chronic disease issues, especially heart disease, or they're caring for someone who does, let's talk. And I would encourage any kind of organization to, if they think that this is not an issue with their organization, or if they're not sure, explore that, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't share about this, oftentimes out of embarrassment. And so it's a much bigger problem than many folks realize. Yeah.
The other way, like I said, as a nonprofit, if you did this with corporations, hey, listen, for a nominal donation fee, we provide all these free resources, articles, things like that, some time counseling, whatever else with your employees. And that initially is all on you, and then you can scale from there. But I think that allows organizations also to, it becomes less commercial and more wellness and driven. So I think, there's something we can talk about later, but I think if you take that, you'll have higher impact, because I think the brand of it will help people, in it, or even, for purpose. A Schedule B or whatever it's called for a C Corp. Jacob, thank you, by the way, for jumping on today with me. I mean, I'll tell you what, anybody who's listening out here just wants to have a really good, deep conversation on any given topic, specifically around this one specifically. Jacob is a good guy, but don't waste his time. But if you really want to talk about your transition, please try to limit it to 15 minutes. So he can, in the 30 minutes he'll meet with you, you can talk about next steps, because you could go on for hours, not you. Thank you, Jacob, for jumping in today.
Thanks, Thomas. I enjoyed the chat. You asked great questions. It always keeps my gears turning.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time on here. I'm going to put you in it's like blue today. Usually it comes out periwinkle, but the blue room. I'll be right back with you. There's no snacks because it's digital. See you in a minute. Thank you for everyone who made it here today and listened and got to this point in the show. Thank you. Never Been Promoted is here to help entrepreneurs get better at entrepreneurship. Jacob's sorting through it himself. He's trying to add value to the world. He's trying to make a business and help people at the same time in a much deeper way than, let's say like a marketer would, or somebody else. He's really trying to help people through life things. And he's somebody who's personally feels connected to it. And so that's a nice person to get to work with if you're facing a life transition. You just don't know what to do. I'd give him a call. Thank you, by the way, once again, everyone. Until we meet again, get out there, go cut a tie to something that's holding you back and go unleash your entrepreneur. Thanks for listening.